Now that the app functionality is working fine, we will start with the styling. So all the buttons are doing what they are supposed to do, well, except of the forgot password button, which is supposed to be as an exercise for you to solve. So now in the next videos, what we are going to do we are going to work on the styling. So this is a program we built together this far, and this is the end stylized product. So in this very video, we are going to work on the login screen. In fact, you can resize them like that to see exactly how they will look in a real phone, because that's more or less the size of a phone, the size ratio. So let's close these two interfaces, and I'll keep this interface open in here to use it as a reference. So we are not doing any work in the Python file, just here in the Kivy file. That's about the design. Right, so first thing you want to add is some padding and some spacing in this grid layout. 15. I'll explain what that means, of course. Spacing 20, 20. So this grid layout, what it is we have the main grid layout, which is the entire widget, and then this grid layout has the user login, label, these two text inputs, and this button, and also an invisible label in here. So we want to add some padding, which means 15 horizontally, which means the distance of the grid layout of this grid layout to the outside borders of the app. So you see we have some 15 distance here, and also there is some distance which you cannot see, but there is a padding here vertically between this label and the main frame. So that is padding, the outside space of this grid layout. And then spacing is 2020 means spacing between the widgets of this grid layout. So spacing is an internal thing and padding is external. You can think of it like that. So 20 pixels between these two and 20 in here as well, between this text box and this button. Well, you can see that there's more space actually than 20 pixels between the button and this text input, but that is because we have also applied in this interface, in this end product, I've also applied some sizing to the button itself. So there is the padding plus the reduction in size of the button. That's why you see more space here. So let's keep it like this, save, and then you need to execute the Python file as always. And so now we have some padding and some spacing between these widgets. How about increasing the font size of user login, this label? So you need to go to the label and set the font size to 20. It has to be a string like this, SP. So now the font size is bigger. Now let's work on the size of the login button. You see that this looks a bit too wide. So how about making it a bit shorter? Well, in Kivy, there is an attribute called size hint, which you can give to a widget, for example, to a button here. Size hint. Now, the way Kivy works is that by default, the area is proportionally divided between the widgets, which means that, for example, here we have the main grid layout, which takes the entire space because it's one grid layout. So it's like a single child, it will get everything. Then this grid layout has two children. It has this grid layout here and it has this grid layout in here. And the area between these two children will be equally divided. So this grid layout the second one has two buttons, the forgot password button and the sign up button. Therefore, you can see that this grid layout here has half of the main grid layout. And the other grid layout, which is the first grid layout, has the other half. The same happens for the children of each of these two grid layouts. So the children of the first grid layout, the label and the text inputs, each of them will again get assigned the space they deserve. So here we had one label, 2, 3, 4, and an invisible label, so 5 widgets, and so every widget will have 20% of this space. However, there is a size hint attribute which I just introduced to you, which allows you to change how much a widget gets from its parent. So size hint. So let's give a value of 0.3 and 0.5 to the login button. What's going to happen is that the login button will be squeezed vertically, you see, because we gave a value of 0.5. So it has half the height. And we also gave a value of 0.3 to squeeze it horizontally, but that doesn't work because there are no other widgets here on the side. So either way, the login button will get again the entire space. It's not splitting any space with other widgets in this direction, in the horizontal direction. To be able to change the button, what we need to do actually is to indent this button and make it the child of a relative layout widget. If you save that and execute, now you'll see that the button has changed position. So it actually has a 0.3, so 30% of this horizontal space. As you can see, it's 1/3 of this horizontal space. And also 0.5, 50% of the height. But if you make this 0.5 less than that, if you make it 0.1, for example, you're not going to get a button with a very, very small height because there's a label there which has a fixed size. And so the minimum you can get is the height of the label for the button. Now, how can we put this button in the center? We need to use a pause hint, which gets a dictionary. Center X 0.5 and center Y 0.6. I experimented with some different values and this is what I found to be best. However, not yet, because these guys here, these buttons are taking too much space. So what we can do is we go to the grid layout that has those buttons, this one here, and we say size hint 0.2, 0.2. Save that and see what happens. So it's looking much better. So size hint is quite magical because it allows you to make the sizes relative. You don't want to set a fixed size because there are different sizes in mobile devices, and it's better to keep everything relatively sized. So what I just did here is I gave this grid layout a 20% space. So 20% here, and this here is 80% for the other grid layout. So the button was squeezing because it tried to do its best using these values that I gave in here for the button, this login button, but it couldn't do it because this grid layout was taking too much space. Therefore 20% is good. And if you like now, you can give some padding of 10 and 10 and spacing of 10 and 0. This was the old one. This is the new one. So not bad. I just gave some spacing between the buttons and some padding relative to the outside. So the horizontal space, this one, and the vertical spacing, vertical. And there are no other buttons vertical on top of these, so this doesn't make much sense. So 0 is just fine. And let me close that. And lastly, let's make those two buttons look like links. So these are the forgot password and sign up. Let's change their background color, which is currently gray, to an RGB and opacity format. So alpha for opacity, and it takes a value from 0 to 1, so it decimal values. You can put 0.1 and so on, and I'll put 1, 1, 1 and 0. 0 means the background color is completely transparent. I'll save that and execute. You can see now that forgot password is like that. However, when I click the button, it doesn't seem to be doing anything like the sign up button. So what we can do is play around with the opacity of the text. Let's put it a value of 1 if self.state is normal, else 0.5. So that's a nice magic that I'll explain you how it works. You see now that when I click the button, I understand that I'm clicking the button. So what's happening is that the opacity is 1 if the state of self refers to the current widget, which is button. So remember, root referred to the rule, which would be like a login screen in here, but self referred to this very button. And if you want to access a property of the grid layout, you could do parent like that. So that self.parent would be pointing to the parent of button, which is grid layout. Well, we don't need that right now. So otherwise, if the state is not normal, like this is the normal state of a button, it's not pressed. There are other states like pressed, released, but this state is normal. And if that's otherwise, if the state is not normal, such as this state here, I've pressed the button, in that case we want to give a value of 0.5 to opacity. So this entire thing here is Python code. Everything actually on the right side of these attributes, here, here, there, everything there is Python code. And lastly, let's change the color of the button. You can use the color attribute for that. Let's do 0.1, so that means 10% of red, 70% of green, and 100% of blue, with a transparency of 1, so not transparent. Save that, and I'm going to copy these 3 attributes and give them to the other button as well, to the sign up button. Save the file, execute. And yeah, this is what I meant to do. So sign up, forget password, I press it, I go to the other page, to the sign up page. So again, this is the interface we have this far for the login screen. One last thing I'd like to add is that currently, when we enter a username, the password is visible. We want to show stars instead of that. So go to the text input for the passwords and access the password attribute and set it to true. So when you set that attribute to true, what happens is that the text input is treated as password input, so it doesn't show the password. And thanks for following this video, and we'll go and stylize the other pages of the app in the next videos. See you!